Welcome to Double Double Two Stories by Ilya Chish. Today we're talking about a moment Patton walked into Eisenhower headquarters and made an impossible promise. Now let me hand it over to my assistant Johnny.
Hey everyone, my name is Joni, and I'm Ilya's assistant here at WW2 Stories by Ilya Chiz. Today, I'm taking you through a story so insane you won't believe it actually happened. December 19th, 1944. A room thick with cigarette smoke and raw tension. General Dwight Eisenhower stares at maps showing a nightmare unfolding in real time. The German offensive has punched a 50-mile hole straight through Allied lines. 3 American divisions shattered. Bastogne about to be surrounded. The Supreme Commander needs a miracle. Every senior Allied commander is in that room. Montgomery, Bradley, Tedder. They're all saying the same thing. Any counterattack will take weeks, maybe a month. The Germans caught everyone off guard. Then the door swings open. A figure walks in unannounced, cavalry boots gleaming, ivory-handled revolvers on his hips. He didn't call ahead, didn't ask permission. He just drove through the night from 3rd Army headquarters, 175 miles away. Eisenhower looks up. His expression shifts from shock to something mixing frustration with relief. He shakes his head slowly and says, "God, it's Patton. George S. Patton, Jr. has arrived, and he's about to make a promise so audacious that half the room will think he's lost his mind." If you want more untold stories from history's greatest military minds, subscribe to WW2 Stories by Ilya Chiz right now. Drop a comment. What fascinates you most about Patton? Or let us know where you're watching from. 4 days earlier, Hitler had launched his final gamble in the West. 25 divisions, over 400,000 men. The objective? Smash through the Ardennes, drive to Antwerp, split the Allied armies, and force a negotiated peace. At 5:30 a.m. on December 16th, 1,600 German artillery pieces erupted along an 80-mile front. American units were overwhelmed. The 106th Infantry Division, on the line for only 5 days, watched 2 regiments become completely surrounded. Within 72 hours, over 8,000 men surrendered, the largest mass capitulation of American forces in the entire European theater. German panzers flooded through the gaps. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper's Kampfgruppe penetrated deep into American lines. On December 17th at Malmedy, his men massacred 84 American POWs in a snow-covered field. By December 19th, Bastogne was facing encirclement. The 101st Airborne and elements of the 10th Armored were racing to defend it. German forces converging from 3 directions. If Bastogne fell, the entire Allied position in Belgium could collapse. Eisenhower had managed maybe 10 hours of sleep in 4 days. His chief of staff later wrote, "The boss looks 10 years older. This is the worst crisis we've faced since D-Day." Montgomery was talking withdrawal. Bradley was devastated. The staff was discussing weeks of preparation for a counterattack. But Eisenhower saw opportunity. The Germans had overextended. Their flanks were vulnerable. If the Allies could hold Bastogne and strike from both sides, they could trap the entire German force. But who could move fast enough? That's when Patton walked in. Patton didn't wait for briefings. He'd already studied the intelligence, already worked the maps, and he'd already done something nobody knew about. Set his staff to work on contingency plans for exactly this scenario. He walked straight to the map, traced his finger along the southern edge of the German penetration and said, "We can attack on the 22nd. Silence. Then the room erupted. December 22nd was 3 days away. Patton's Third Army was 150 miles south, actively fighting toward the Saar River. To disengage, pivot 90 degrees north, move 3 divisions through winter weather on roads choked with refugees, and attack the most powerful German offensive since 1940, all in 72 hours? It was madness. British Air Marshal Tedder later wrote, "I thought Patton had finally overreached. What he proposed violated every principle of military logistics." But Eisenhower leaned forward. He knew Patton. He'd worked with him through North Africa, Sicily, all the triumphs and disasters. "George," Eisenhower said, "when can you actually attack?" Patton didn't hesitate. Morning of December 22nd, 3 divisions. "That's just the beginning," Eisenhower pressed. "We need sustained offensive pressure all the way to Bastogne." "I can have 6 divisions in motion within a week," Patton replied, "and I'll keep attacking until we've cut off every German in that bulge." The room erupted again. A logistics officer noted the roads were jammed. Bradley said quietly, "George, are you certain?" Patton turned to him. "Brad." This time the Kraut stuck his head in a meat grinder. He looked back at Eisenhower. "And this time I've got hold of the handle." Eisenhower demanded specifics. Patton laid out his plan. Third Corps would attack with the 4th Armored, 26th Infantry, and 81st Infantry Divisions. Drive north from Luxembourg, smash through the German southern shoulder, punch through to Bastogne. One massive problem: Patton's forces were spread across 100 miles, actively engaged. To execute this, he'd need to disengage 133,178 men, reorient them 90 degrees, move them 75 miles through winter weather, reorganize supply lines, and attack, all in 72 hours. Eisenhower studied Patton, then asked, "When did you start planning this?" Patton grinned. "December 16th, the day they attacked." Patton had anticipated this moment. While others scrambled to understand what was happening, he'd already prepared 3 separate contingency plans. He'd designated units, alerted supply officers, done everything without disobeying orders. Lieutenant General Harold Bull later wrote, "Patton had been planning for 3 days while we were still figuring out how bad things were. That's why he could make such an audacious promise." Eisenhower made his decision. "All right, George, you'll attack on the 22nd. I'm giving you operational control of Third Corps. Continuous pressure, no stopping. You attack and keep attacking until we've eliminated this bulge." Then he added, "Gentlemen, General Patton has just made us a promise that sounds impossible." He turned to Patton. "When something sounds impossible, that's usually when he's most dangerous." Patton drove through the night, back to Nancy, arriving at 2:30 a.m. on December 20th. His staff was waiting. "We're going," he announced. "Alert all units. We attack on the 22nd. What followed was one of the most remarkable military movements in history. The 4th Armored Division had to move 150 miles through winter weather on roads choked with retreating troops and refugees. Major General Hugh Gaffey later recalled, "We received the order at 0400 hours. I looked at the weather, 12 inches of snow expected, and thought, we're attempting something that can't be done." But they did it. Military police established traffic control every few miles. Patton rode up and down the columns, urging speed. When he hit bottlenecks, he got out and directed traffic himself. a three-star general playing traffic cop. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams remembered, "We were stuck behind jackknife supply trucks." Patton jumped out, walked over to the drivers, told them they had 5 minutes or he'd have tanks push them off. Then looked at me and said, "Colonel, every hour you waste is another American dying in Bastogne. Move!" The trucks were clear in 3 minutes. The 26th Infantry moved from Sarre to Luxembourg in 48 hours through snow and sleet. The 81st Infantry covered nearly 100 miles. All told, 133,178 men, 3,244 tanks, 11,000 vehicles. Colonel Halley Maddox later wrote, "If someone told me in advance, I'd have said it needed 10 days. Patton did it in 3. I still don't understand how." The secret was Patton's obsessive focus on tempo. His entire command philosophy was built around speed. While Patton's divisions raced north, Bastogne was being surrounded. The 101st Airborne under Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe reached the town December 19th. By the 20th, German forces had completely encircled it. 7 roads converged on Bastogne, a vital communications hub. McAuliffe had 18,000 men. They faced at least 45,000 Germans. On December 21st, the day before Patton's attack, the German commander demanded surrender. The ultimatum: there is only one possibility to save the encircled USA troops from total annihilation: the honorable surrender of the encircled town. McAuliffe's reply became legendary: "Nuts." The Germans were confused. McAuliffe's operations officer explained, "It means go to hell." But Bastogne's situation was critical: artillery ammunition low, medical supplies exhausted, weather too poor for airdrops, German attacks intensifying. Patton monitored hourly. On December 21st evening, he wrote, "We attack in the morning. If we fail, Bastogne falls. If Bastogne falls, the whole front could collapse. Either we pull off a miracle, or we hand Hitler his last victory." That night, Patton, deeply religious despite his profane exterior, asked his chaplain to compose a prayer for good weather. The prayer was printed and distributed to every Third Army soldier. Then he slept 4 hours. The first real rest since the crisis began. December 22, 1944, dawned cold and clear. The weather had miraculously broken. After days of snow and fog, the sun emerged. Allied aircraft could finally fly. At 0600 hours, 3rd Corps artillery opened fire, 300 guns. Concentrated barrage on German positions. At 0615 hours, 3 divisions attacked north on a 20-mile front. The Germans were caught off guard. They'd been focused on Bastogne, pushing west. They hadn't anticipated a major counterattack from the south, certainly not this quickly. Still, they fought hard. Elite paratroopers, SS Panzer units, veteran forces motivated by initial success. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams' 37th Tank Battalion hit a German strongpoint at Martelange. Anti-tank guns knocked out 3 Shermans in 15 minutes. Abrams called artillery, then led tanks through a forest not supposed to be passable for armor. They broke through, but took all day to advance 4 miles. The 26th Infantry faced worse, attacking through Rambrusch, where Germans had prepared positions. Machine guns covered every approach. The 104th Infantry Regiment lost 156 men on December 22nd alone. By nightfall, Patton's forces had advanced only 6 to 8 miles. still 35 miles from Bastogne. At this rate, a week? Bastogne didn't have a week. Patton rejected every suggestion to pause and consolidate. According to staff notes, he said, "The Germans expect us to stop. They expect caution. We're not stopping. We're attacking through the night, through Christmas if we have to. We break through to Bastogne, because if we don't, those men die. And if they die, Hitler wins." Orders went to all commanders: maintain continuous pressure, attack through the night, no rest. When you stop, the enemy recovers. Keep moving. December 23rd brought better weather. The Luftwaffe appeared. German FW-19Os strafing columns. Allied P-47s and P-51s responded. For the first time since the offensive began, the Allies had air superiority. More critically, improved weather allowed C-47s to fly supply missions to Bastogne. Operation Repulse, 241 C-47s dropped 144 tons of supplies into the surrounded town. The garrison watched parachutes fill the sky and cheered. Patton's forces ground north. The 4th Armored split into 3 combat commands, pushing multiple axes. Fighting was savage. Tank duels at 400 to 600 yards, infantry clearing houses room by room, villages reduced to rubble. The 4th Armored lost 39 tanks on December 23rd, destroyed 55 German tanks. But exchange rate didn't matter. Forward progress mattered. That night, Germans counterattacked. The 1st SS Panzer threw 2 companies of Panthers at American lines near Bougainville at 0200 hours, hoping darkness would negate artillery superiority. They didn't count on Patton's night fighting doctrine. Tank destroyers opened fire with 76mm guns. Artillery forward observers with new proximity-fused shells called devastating defensive fires. The German attack shattered in an hour. 17 burning Panthers in the snow. Back at Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower received hourly updates. Pressure was immense. Montgomery, suggesting Patton's attack was too hasty, would peter out. Churchill asking questions. Marshall calling from Washington. Could Patton deliver? Eisenhower's aide wrote December 23rd, "Ike hasn't slept more than 4 hours a night. Lost weight. Smokes constantly. But hasn't second-guessed letting Patton attack. He keeps saying, 'George will get there.' He always does." December 24th, Christmas Eve, fighting intensified. Both sides knew time was running out. For Germans, the offensive was failing. Hadn't reached the Meuse. Running out of fuel, American dumps evacuated, and Patton rolling up their flank. For Americans, every hour mattered. Intelligence. Bastogne's ammunition nearly depleted. Medical supplies gone. Doctors operating without anesthesia. Food so scarce, the 101st was eating captured German rations. The 4th, Armored, 12 miles from Bastogne, hit toughest opposition yet. Chaumont held by elite paratroopers, reinforced by assault guns, positioned behind minefields. Approaches covered by interlocking fire. Perfect defensive position. Abrams studied it through binoculars. Frontal assault. Suicide. Flanking maneuver. Days they didn't have. Abrams made a career-defining decision. Ordered tanks to advance in column straight down the road at maximum speed. Blast through before Germans could concentrate fire. Accept casualties for momentum. Calculated risk, bordering on recklessness. But Abrams had learned from Patton, sometimes audacity wins when caution fails. At 1300 hours December 24th, Combat Command A roared toward Chaumont. German anti-tank guns opened immediately. Lead Sherman knocked out within seconds. Second tank swerved around, kept going. Third hit, kept moving, trailing smoke. Column didn't stop. Abrams' tank, fourth in line. He stood in the turret directing fire as shells impacted around him. Gunner engaged positions while the tank rolled forward at 15 miles per hour. A mechanized cavalry charge shouldn't have worked, but it did. Speed and violence overwhelmed defenders. American tanks crashed through firing on the move. Infantry followed in half-tracks, dismounted to clear buildings. 2 hours. Chaumont taken. Cost 8 tanks. 53 men. But they'd broken the last major defensive line before Bastogne. 7 miles remained. Christmas Eve. As fighting raged, soldiers on both sides briefly acknowledged the holiday. In Bastogne, paratroopers attended midnight mass in a bombed church. In German positions, soldiers sang Stille Nacht. At Patton's headquarters, the general attended chapel, then immediately back to work. He wrote, "A clear, cold Christmas Eve. Lovely weather for killing Germans." He'd received word Abrams broke through at Chaumont. The road to Bastogne was open, nearly, but Germans converging to close it. The 1st SS Panzer moving units to block the corridor. The 26th Volksgrenadier preparing counterattack. At midnight, as Christmas Eve became Christmas, Patton sent a message. "We attack at dawn. No excuses. We reach Bastogne tomorrow or die trying." December 25th, 1944, coldest Christmas in Belgian history. Temperatures 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice on roads. Fog reducing visibility to 100 yards. The 4th Armored attacked. Abrams led his battalion out at 06:30 before dawn. Rolled through Remoisville, Clochemont, Assenois. German forces, exhausted, low on ammunition, beginning to crack. Some fought fanatically, others surrendered, many retreated. At 1400 hours, Abrams' lead tanks crested a ridge. Saw in the valley below Bastogne. American paratroopers holding the perimeter between Abrams and Bastogne, the village of Assenois. Approximately 500 German soldiers. Abrams didn't hesitate, formed tanks into wedge formation, 5 Shermans abreast, attacked straight down the road, another all-or-nothing assault. Germans fought desperately. Panzerfausts streaked from buildings, machine guns raked tanks. 2 Shermans knocked out, 3 hit, kept moving. Abrams' tank led. Gunner firing 75 millimeters, bow gunner spraying .30 caliber. Tank crashed through roadblock, burst through village. At 16:45 hours Christmas Day 1944, Abrams' lead tank made contact with 101st Airborne forward positions. The siege of Bastogne was broken. First Lieutenant Charles Boggess, commanding the lead tank, first man from 3rd Army to shake hands with 101st paratroopers. According to witnesses, he simply said, "We're from the 4th Armored. Patton sent us." The link-up was tactical success, but not the end. The corridor was narrow. Germans tried to cut it. Fierce fighting raged as 3rd Army widened the corridor, but strategic reality shifted. Hitler's last great Western offensive had failed. Germans, 100,000 casualties, 600 tanks lost, irreplaceable fuel and ammunition expended. Initiative permanently to the Allies. Patton's 3rd Army, 15,000 casualties in 10 days. The 4th Armored alone lost over 1,000 men, but they'd accomplished the impossible. December 26th, Eisenhower sent Patton a message. "The outstanding accomplishment of your 3rd Army and its rapid movement to Bastogne is a magnificent feat of arms." But the more revealing communication came in a private call. According to Eisenhower's naval aide present when he made the call, the Supreme Commander said, "George, you son of a bitch, you actually did it." Patton's response, "I told you I would, Ike. Next time, maybe you'll believe me from the start." Vintage Patton, arrogant, cocky, impossible to deal with, and absolutely right. German General Heinrich Freiherr von Lüttwitz, whose corps faced Patton's attack, later said in post-war interrogations, "We knew the Americans had material superiority, air power, but we thought we had time to consolidate. We thought they'd take weeks to organize counterattack. Patton attacked in 3 days, fastest movement of that scale I saw in the entire war." Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt. Patton's relief of Bastogne was the most brilliant operation of the war. 3 full divisions over that distance in that time, in winter, against our forces. Unmatched. Captain William Dwight, 4th Armored Company commander, wrote home January 2nd, 1945. "We did something we didn't think could be done. Moved faster, fought harder than we knew we could. Why? Because Patton said we would. With Patton, you don't question. You just do it." Eisenhower's willingness to trust Patton's audacious promise, attack in 3 days, move an Army Corps 75 miles through winter, sustain operations in worse conditions, demonstrated his growth as Supreme Commander. He'd learned to use his most difficult subordinates' greatest strengths at the moment they were most needed. The irony, Eisenhower, careful planner, coalition manager, political general; Patton, hell-for-leather warrior, impatient with politics, disdainful of caution. Opposites in temperament, clashed repeatedly, yet formed one of the most effective command partnerships in military history. Eisenhower later wrote, "George Patton was the most brilliant commander in the open field our service produced. He had the warrior's soul, but he required supervision and restraint. Managing Patton was like riding a high-spirited horse. You had to control the reins while giving him his head to run." Patton wrote December 31st, 1944. "Ike let me attack when everyone said impossible. Trusted me when caution said wait. That's what separates him. He understands sometimes you risk everything on one bold throw." The relief of Bastogne cemented Patton's reputation. Third Army would go on to fight through the Siegfried Line across the Rhine into Germany's heart, liberate concentration camps, capture hundreds of thousands of prisoners, race through Bavaria to Austria. But many soldiers said those 10 December days were when they truly understood serving under George S. Patton. Sergeant Bernard Ryan, 26th Infantry. "We called it Patton's Ghost Army. Moved so fast, Germans didn't know where we'd appear. But it wasn't magic. It was Patton driving us harder than we thought possible, asking more than we thought we could give, and somehow we gave it. Soldiers respected Patton because he delivered on promises. Said he'd reach Bastogne. Did. Said he'd keep them supplied. Did. Supply officers performed miracles over icy roads. Said he'd break the offensive. Did. But also because he risked himself alongside them. Throughout the drive, Patton constantly at the front, well forward of where a 3-star had business being, visited battalions in contact, directed traffic at bottlenecks, exposed himself to German fire with casualness that terrified staff. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Harkins, the general believed a commander's place was forward. See situations with own eyes. Make decisions without delays. He took risks that made us nervous. But men loved him. They knew he'd never ask them to do something he wouldn't do himself. The relief of Bastogne wasn't just about tactics or planning. It was about leadership, trust, and willingness to attempt the impossible. Eisenhower's decision to trust Patton's promise revealed something essential about highest-level command. Sometimes you bet everything on your subordinate's ability to achieve what staff officers say can't be done. Eisenhower had intelligence reports, logistics assessments, weather forecasts, all suggesting Patton's timeline was unrealistic. But he also had knowledge of Patton's character, track record, obsessive drive to exceed expectations. That judgment call to say yes when prudent answer was maybe changed the Battle of the Bulge's course, possibly the war's. If Eisenhower insisted on caution, Bastogne might have fallen, German offensive might have gained momentum. Allies forced into winter stalemate. But the story also reveals something about Patton often lost in mythology. Yes, audacious. Yes, aggressive to recklessness. But also meticulous planner who understood logistics, supply, operational timing. His ability to promise 3 days wasn't bluster. Based on contingency plans his staff worked on since December 16th. Patton's genius, anticipation. While others reacted to German offensive, Patton already planning how to counter it. While others tried understanding what happened, Patton 3 steps ahead, thinking what would happen next. General Omar Bradley. George Patton could see 3 moves ahead like a chess grandmaster. Rest of us playing checkers while he played chess. That's why he could make promises that sounded insane. He'd already thought through all steps to make them happen. If you want more stories of decisive leadership and impossible victories, subscribe to WW2 Stories by Ilya Chaz now and hit the notification bell. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Share it with anyone who loves military history. Here's something to think about. Eisenhower could have played it safe, could have waited for perfect conditions, could have listened to voices saying Patton's plan was too risky, but he didn't. He trusted audacity over caution. Remember that next time someone tells you something can't be done, sometimes the impossible is just something nobody's tried yet. Patton's arrival at Eisenhower's headquarters and his relief of Bastogne reminds us that great achievements often begin with someone willing to make an audacious promise. Patton promised he'd attack in 3 days, promised he'd reach Bastogne, promised he'd break the German offensive. Despite weather, terrain, logistics, enemy resistance all arguing against him, he kept every promise. That's what made him both infuriating and indispensable. That's why Eisenhower kept bringing him back for crucial battles. And that's why, 80 years later, we still study those 10 December days when one general said he'd do the impossible, another trusted him enough to let him try, and an entire army proved that belief and determination can overcome any obstacle.